Dr. Vexhai pressed her long, slender fingers against the cool metal of the recording device. Her golden eyes, large and luminous like those of all Zilani, reflected the dim emergency lighting that now filled the ship's corridors. The Kethvara had been her home for 3 years, and now it would be her tomb. Personal log, day 47 since engine failure, she spoke into the device, her voice carrying the musical quality that made Zilani's speech sound like singing to other species. Life support systems are functioning at 30% capacity. Chief Engineer Cole then estimates we have perhaps 10 days remaining before complete failure. She paused, looking through the viewport at the endless darkness outside. Stars dotted the black canvas, but they were so distant, they might as well have been painted there. The ship drifted silently through the void, 47 light years from the nearest Confederacy outpost. The irony is not lost on me, she continued. We came here to study the strange energy readings from this region. We wanted to expand the boundaries of knowledge. Instead, we found our own boundary. The Kethvara had been one of the Galactic Confederacy's finest research vessels. Its sleek design and advanced technology represented the best that Zilani engineering could offer. The ship's exotic matter containment system had allowed them to travel farther and faster than most other species could manage. That same system had also been their downfall. The containment breach had happened without warning. One moment they were collecting data on the mysterious energy signatures that had brought them to this remote sector. The next, alarms were screaming throughout the ship as exotic matter leaked into the engine compartments. The automatic safety systems had worked perfectly, sealing off the contaminated areas and preventing the breach from destroying the ship entirely. Unfortunately, those same safety measures had left them stranded with no way to repair the damage. Captain Threshamol had followed proper Confederacy protocols. He had sent a detailed report of their situation to Central Command, along with a formal request for rescue. The response had arrived within 6 days, carried by quantum relay across the vast distances of space. Vexhai remembered the moment when Threshamol had called the crew together to share the Confederacy's decision. His usually composed features had shown strain as he read the official message. The rescue mission would require 3 ships and take nearly 2 months to complete. The cost would exceed the value of the Kethvara and its crew by a factor of 12. Therefore, Threshamol had read in a steady voice, this mission is classified as economically unfeasible. The crew of the Kethvara will be remembered for their contribution to scientific advancement. Remembered, past tense. They were already dead in the eyes of the Confederacy. The Zilani way was logical, efficient, and utterly without sentiment. Every decision was made based on careful calculation of costs and benefits. Personal feelings were considered a weakness that clouded proper judgment. It was a system that had made the Zilani the most advanced technological civilization in known space. It was also a system that had just condemned 12 people to death because saving them was too expensive. Vex's High had dedicated her life to serving that system. She had spent decades studying alien life forms, always following the protocols, always submitting her findings to benefit the greater good of the Confederacy. She had believed that knowledge and logic would always triumph over chaos and emotion. Now, as she sat alone in her laboratory surrounded by a lifetime of research, she wondered if there might be something wrong with a system that could calculate the value of lives so easily. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. The ship's communication system was alerting her to incoming signals. Vexhai frowned. There should be no signals this far from civilized space. Perhaps the system was malfunctioning along with everything else. She made her way to the bridge where she found Communications Officer Yithran staring at his displays with an expression of confusion. His normally neat appearance was disheveled after weeks of declining ship services, but his large eyes were bright with something that might have been hope. Dr. Vexhai, he said without looking up from his console, I am detecting a response to our emergency beacon. A response? Captain Threshamol emerged from his ready room, moving with the careful grace that all Zilani possessed. That is impossible. The Confederacy has already declined to assist us. Yes, sir, Yithran replied. But this signal is not from the Confederacy. The transmission identifies the responding vessel as the Perseverance, registry number ECF 2847. Threshamol's golden eyes narrowed. ECF, what does that designation mean? Yithran worked at his controls for a moment. According to our databases, ECF stands for Earth Colonial Fleet. A silence fell over the bridge. Every member of the crew present turned to look at the communication officer, as if he had announced that the ship's computer had become sentient and declared itself emperor. Earth? Dr. Vexhai spoke first. The human homeworld? Yes, Doctor. The responding vessel appears to be of human origin. Vexhai felt something strange in her chest, an emotion that Zilani training had taught her to suppress. Humans were barely more than primitives in the eyes of the Confederacy. They had achieved interstellar flight only 50 Terran years ago, making them the newest members of galactic civilization. They were used primarily for dangerous labor in frontier regions, as their crude technology and emotional decision-making made them unsuitable for more important work. What could humans possibly be doing this far from their small cluster of frontier colonies? And more importantly, what could they do to help that the advanced Confederacy could not? Sir, Yithron continued, the vessel is requesting permission to approach. They say they have received our distress call and are prepared to render assistance. Captain Thresmol stood silently for a long moment. The Zilani way would be to politely decline the human's offer. After all, what could primitive aliens accomplish that sophisticated Zilani technology could not? It would be more logical to spend their remaining time putting their affairs in order and preparing for the end. But as Vexhai looked around the bridge at her crewmates, she saw something in their eyes that had not been there since the Confederacy's abandonment. Hope was not a logical emotion, but it was a powerful one. Grant them permission to approach, Thresmol said finally, and patch me through to their captain. The view screen flickered to life, showing the approaching human vessel. Vexhai had expected something crude and primitive, but the Perseverance was larger than she had imagined. It was clearly a cargo ship, built for function rather than elegance, but it moved through space with surprising grace. This is Captain Maria Santos of the Earth Colonial Fleet vessel Perseverance, came a voice over the communication system. The universal translator rendered the words in perfect Zilani, but the tone carried an odd quality that Vexhai had never heard before. It sounded like determination mixed with something else. Concern, perhaps. Captain Santos, Thresmol replied. I am Captain Thresmol of the Confederacy research vessel Kethvara. We appreciate your response to our distress call. But I must inform you that our situation may be beyond assistance. Our engine systems have suffered catastrophic failure, and we are stranded without means of repair. Copy that, Captain, Santos replied without hesitation. We're going to need a full technical briefing on your damage, but don't worry about whether we can fix it. We'll figure something out. That's what we do. Vexhai blinked in surprise. The human captain had not asked about costs, had not requested authorization from her superiors, had not even asked what the Zilani could offer in return for assistance. She had simply accepted the problem as something to be solved. For the first time in 47 days, Vexhai began to believe they might actually survive. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the Perseverance, studying the sleek alien vessel that hung in space before them. The Zilani ship was beautiful in a way that human engineering rarely achieved. Every line was perfect, every surface smooth and gleaming, even in the dim starlight. It looked like something that belonged in a museum, not drifting dead in the void. Jesus, muttered her pilot, Lieutenant James Park, from his station. Look at that thing. It's like they built it out of jewelry. Santos nodded. The Perseverance was a working ship, scarred and patched from years of hauling cargo through dangerous space. Her hull was painted in practical gray, with bright warning stripes around the airlocks and engine ports. She was built to take damage and keep flying. The Zilani vessel looked like it had never seen a day of hard use. Chief, what's our status? Santos called to her chief engineer. Thomas Tank Kowalski emerged from the engineering section, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. He was a big man with graying hair and arms like tree trunks from years of working on stubborn machinery. We're solid, Captain. The cargo's secure and I've got the emergency repair kits ready to go. Good. Dr. Kim, you ready for this? Dr. Jennifer Kim looked up from her medical scanner readings. She was young for a ship's doctor, but she had earned her place on the crew by keeping everyone healthy and functional during 3 years of frontier runs. I've got the medical bay prepped and ready, though I have to admit I've never treated an alien before. Well, there's a first time for everything, Santos said with a grin. Come, get me the Zilani captain again. The main screen flickered, showing the interior of the alien ship's bridge. The Zilani were tall and slender, with golden skin and large eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Their captain stood with perfect posture, hands clasped behind his back in a way that reminded Santos of formal military ceremonies. "Captain Santos," the alien said, "I must ask you again to reconsider. Our situation is quite dangerous. The exotic matter containment breach has made large sections of our ship uninhabitable. Even if your people could somehow repair our engines, the radiation exposure alone would be—" "Captain," Santos interrupted gently, "with respect, let us worry about what we can and can't do. That's our job. Your job is to keep your people alive until we figure this out." She turned to Tank. "Chief, how long do you need to get over there and take a look?" Tank scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Give me 20 minutes to gather my team and tools. But Captain, I gotta say, I don't know anything about exotic matter or whatever these folks use for power." "So you'll learn," Santos said simply. "You always do." The truth was, Santos didn't know much about Zilani technology either. Humans were considered the junior partners in galactic civilization, if they were considered partners at all. Most of what humanity knew about alien technology came from studying equipment that other species had discarded or sold cheaply. But Santos had learned something important during her years on the frontier. When people needed help, you helped them. You figured out the details later. An hour later, Tank and his engineering team were aboard the Zilani vessel, led through pristine corridors by a nervous alien engineer. Santos watched through Tank's helmet camera as they made their way toward the damaged sections of the ship. "This is incredible." Tank's voice came through the comm system. "Captain, you should see this stuff. Everything's so clean and precise. It's like they built this ship in a laboratory." The Zilani engineer, whose name was Colthan, gestured toward a sealed blast door. "The containment breach occurred beyond this point," he explained through the universal translator. "The radiation levels are still quite dangerous." Tank nodded and activated his portable scanner. The device was crude compared to Zilani equipment, but it did the job. "Yeah, I'm reading some nasty stuff in there. But it's nothing we can't handle with the right gear." "You have radiation suits capable of protecting against exotic matter exposure?" Cole then asked, surprise evident in his voice. "Well, no," Tank admitted, "but we've got suits that'll protect against just about everything else, and we can rig up some extra shielding." "Won't be pretty, but it'll work." Santos smiled as she listened. Tank's approach to engineering was simple. If something was broken, you fixed it. If you didn't have the right tools, you made them. If you didn't know how something worked, you figured it out. It was a very human way of thinking. Meanwhile, Dr. Kim was in the Zilani medical bay, working with their chief medical officer to treat 3 crew members who had been injured during the containment breach. The Zilani Dr. Meltar watched with obvious skepticism as Kim set up her equipment. "Dr. Kim," Meltar said carefully, "I appreciate your desire to help, but human medical knowledge cannot possibly apply to Zilani physiology. Our biological systems are completely different." Kim nodded as she calibrated her scanner. "You're absolutely right. That's why I'm not going to treat you like humans. I'm going to treat you like patients." She began taking readings, her portable medical scanner humming softly as it analyzed the injured Zilani. The device was designed to work with any carbon-based life form, adjusting its readings based on observed biological patterns. "Interesting," Kim murmured, studying the results. "Your cellular structure is more efficient than ours, but the basic chemistry is similar. The radiation has caused damage to your equivalent of white blood cells, which is why your immune systems are compromised." Meltar leaned forward, suddenly interested despite himself. "How could you possibly determine that so quickly?" "Because injury is injury," Kim replied, beginning to prepare a treatment. "The details change, but the principles stay the same. Your people are hurt, and hurt people need help. Everything else is just details we can work out." Back in engineering, Tank was deep in conversation with Cole then, sketching diagrams on a portable tablet while the Zilani engineer watched in fascination. "So you see," Tank was saying, "we can't fix your exotic matter system because we don't have exotic matter. But we can bypass it entirely. We'll route power from our fusion plant through a conversion interface, then feed it into your secondary systems. That is..." Colden paused, clearly struggling with the concept. "That is completely against standard procedure. The power specifications are entirely incompatible." "Yeah, well, we'll make them compatible," Tank said cheerfully. "Might not be pretty, and it definitely won't be up to your usual standards, but it'll get you moving again." "But the risk," Colden protested. "If the conversion interface fails, it could damage both ships. Tank shrugged. Could happen. But if we don't try, you're definitely going to die out here. I'll take could happen over definitely will any day. On the bridge of the Perseverance, Santos was having a similar conversation with the Zilani captain. Threshold appeared on the main screen, his golden eyes reflecting what Santos was beginning to recognize as confusion. Captain Santos, he said, I must ask you directly, what does your government expect to gain from this rescue operation? What compensation do they require? Santos blinked in surprise. Compensation? Captain, we're not here for compensation. We're here because you needed help. But surely your superiors will require some form of payment for the risk and expense involved in this operation? My superiors? Santos laughed. Captain, my superiors are back at New Avalon Colony, probably wondering why we're 3 days late with their mining equipment. This isn't some official government operation. This is just the right thing to do. Threshold was quiet for a long moment. I do not understand, he said finally. Your people are risking your ship and your lives for strangers who can offer you nothing in return. This is not logical behavior. Maybe not, Santos agreed. But it's human behavior, and sometimes being human is more important than being logical. As she spoke, Santos realized that this rescue was about more than saving a stranded ship. The Zilani were learning something about humanity that no amount of diplomatic contact could teach. They were seeing what humans did when no one was watching, when there was nothing to gain and everything to lose. They were learning that sometimes the most illogical thing you could do was also the most important. Dr. Vexai found herself spending more and more time in the human medical bay, watching Dr. Kim work with a fascination that surprised her. The human doctor moved with quick, efficient motions that seemed chaotic at first, but revealed their own logic as time passed. She was treating Zilani patients with techniques that had never been tested on their species. Yet somehow it was working. The cellular regeneration stimulator should help repair the radiation damage, Kim explained as she adjusted the settings on a device that looked nothing like Zilani medical equipment. It's designed for human tissue, but I've modified the frequency to match your cellular structure. Meltar, the Zilani chief medical officer, watched nervously. Dr. Kim, this is highly irregular. We have no data on how human medical technology will interact with Zilani biology. Then we'll create the data, Kim replied calmly. She activated the device and soft blue light began to bathe the injured Zilani crew member. Medicine isn't just about following protocols. Sometimes you have to make your best guess and adjust as you go. Vexai observed the patient's vital signs on the monitoring equipment. To her amazement, they were improving. The human doctor was literally making up new medical procedures as she went along, and they were working. How do you do this? Vexai asked. How do you make decisions without complete information? Kim looked up from her work, surprised by the question. Well, you use what information you have, apply basic principles, and hope for the best. In medicine, waiting for perfect information usually means people die while you're waiting. It was such a simple answer, yet it challenged everything Vexai had been taught about proper scientific method. The Zilani way was to gather all available data, analyze it thoroughly, and only then proceed with the optimal solution. But these humans seemed to thrive on incomplete information and improvised solutions. Meanwhile, in the engineering sections, Tank and his team were making progress that defied all logical expectations. The human engineer had somehow managed to create a working interface between human fusion technology and Zilani power distribution systems. The result was crude, improvised, and held together with what appeared to be metal tape and determination. This should not work, Colden muttered, as he watched Tank make final adjustments to the jury-rigged power coupling. The energy conversion ratios are all wrong. The safety protocols are non-existent. The whole system violates basic engineering principles. Yeah, but does it work? Tank asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. Cole then checked his readings reluctantly. Yes, he admitted. It works somehow. Then it's good engineering, Tank said with satisfaction. Pretty isn't the point. Working is the point. The improvised repairs had taken 3 days. During that time, something unexpected had happened aboard both ships. The crews had begun to work together, share meals, and even develop friendships. Vexai found herself spending hours talking with Dr. Kim about everything from medical procedures to personal philosophy. Your government really just abandoned you? Kim asked during one of their conversations. They were in the Kethvara's observation lounge. looking out at the stars while sharing a meal of human ration bars and Zilani nutrition supplements. Yes, Vexhai replied. It was the logical decision based on economic analysis. The cost of rescue exceeded our value to the Confederacy. Kim shook her head. That's terrible. How can you put a price on someone's life? Everything has a price, Vexhai said, though the words felt strange in her mouth now. Resources are limited. Choices must be made, but who gets to make those choices? Kim asked. And what gives them the right to decide who lives and who dies? It was a question that Vexhai had never considered before. In Zilani society, such decisions were made by committees of experts who calculated the greatest good for the greatest number. It was efficient, logical, and utterly without sentiment. It was also, she was beginning to realize, completely without compassion. On the fourth day, Tank announced that the repairs were complete enough to attempt a restart of the Kethavara's engines. The power coupling he had built would allow the human ship to provide enough energy to get the Zilani vessel moving again, though not at full capacity. The thing is, Tank explained to both captains during a joint briefing, this setup won't get you home. We can give you enough power for basic systems and slow propulsion, but you'll need major repairs before you can make any long jumps. Captain Threshamol nodded. We understand. If you can provide transportation to the nearest Confederacy outpost, we will be grateful. Santos was quiet for a moment, studying the star charts on her display. The nearest Confederacy outpost is 8 weeks away at the speed you'll be able to manage. But there's a human colony that's only 3 weeks from here. New Avalon. They've got repair facilities that might be able to help you out. A human colony? Threshamol looked uncertain. Would they have the capability to repair Zilani technology? Probably not, Santos admitted. But they'd try. And they might surprise you. Frontier colonies have to be pretty resourceful to survive. Vexhai found herself speaking up. Captain, I believe we should accept their offer. These humans have already achieved what our own engineers said was impossible. Threshamol considered this. The logical choice would be to head for the Confederacy outpost, where proper repair facilities and familiar technology waited. But logic had already failed them once. Perhaps it was time to try something different? Very well, he said finally. We will accompany you to this new Avalon colony. What followed was unlike anything in Vexhai's experience. The two ships, linked by Tank's improvised power coupling, began the long journey to human space. The Perseverance essentially towed the larger Zilani vessel, her engines straining under the additional load. During the journey, the boundaries between the two crews began to blur. Human engineers worked alongside Zilani technicians to maintain the jury-rigged systems. Dr. Kim and Meltar collaborated on medical research, comparing their different approaches to healing. Even the ship's cooks began sharing recipes, though the results were often inedible to one species or the other. Vexhai spent her time documenting everything she observed about human behavior. What she found challenged every assumption she had made about these supposedly primitive aliens. They approached problems with a creativity that bordered on recklessness, yet somehow their improvised solutions worked. They made decisions based on emotion and instinct, yet those decisions often proved wiser than careful logical analysis. Most importantly, they seemed incapable of abandoning someone in need, even when helping meant significant cost or risk to themselves. Your people are remarkable, she told Captain Santos one evening as they stood together on the Perseverance's bridge, watching the stars crawl past. How so? Santos asked. You help without calculating the cost. You take risks for people you barely know. You refuse to give up even when logic says you should. Santos smiled. Maybe that's because we know what it's like to be abandoned. Humans spent most of our history fighting each other, leaving people behind, choosing survival over compassion. We learned the hard way that when you abandon others, you abandon part of yourself. The Confederacy would call such thinking inefficient, Vexhai observed. The Confederacy called us primitives, Santos replied, but they also abandoned you to die while we're here risking our ship to save you. Maybe there's more than one way to measure efficiency. As the journey continued, Vexhai began to understand that she was witnessing something that would change everything. These humans, dismissed as backward by galactic civilization, were demonstrating principles that the advanced Confederacy had forgotten. They were showing that sometimes the most logical thing you could do was to be completely illogical. They were proving that civilization wasn't about technology or efficiency. It was about refusing to leave anyone behind. New Avalon appeared on the view screen as a small blue-green world orbiting a modest yellow star. The planet was unremarkable by galactic standards, with no exotic resources or strategic importance. It was exactly the kind of world that the Confederacy considered barely worth colonizing, which was precisely why the humans had chosen it. Dr. Vexhai stood on the bridge of the Kethvara as they approached the human colony, studying the orbital installations through the ship's sensors. The space around New Avalon was busy with traffic, but not the sleek, efficient vessels she was accustomed to seeing around Confederacy worlds. These ships were working craft, scarred and practical, built for function rather than beauty. 3 weeks, Captain Threshamol murmured, studying the same displays. They towed us for 3 weeks through dangerous space to bring us here. The colonial traffic control system was surprisingly sophisticated for such a remote outpost. Within minutes of their arrival, they were being guided toward orbital repair facilities that looked capable of handling ships much larger than the Kethvara. New Avalon control to incoming vessels, came a voice over the communication system. This is Governor Sarah Chen. Captain Santos, good to see you again. We were starting to worry when you didn't show up on schedule. Sorry about that, Governor, Santos replied from the Perseverance. We had to make a detour to pick up some friends who were having engine trouble. Friends, is it? Chen's voice carried amusement. Well, any friends of yours are welcome here. We'll have repair teams standing by. Vexhai was struck by the casual tone of the conversation. There were no formal protocols, no requests for authorization, no questions about payment or compensation. The human governor had simply accepted that strangers needed help and offered it without hesitation. Within hours, the Kethvara was docked at New Avalon's primary repair station, and human technicians were swarming over the ship with an enthusiasm that both impressed and worried the Zalani crew. These humans approached the advanced alien technology with the same fearless curiosity that Tank had shown during the initial rescue. Governor Chen came aboard personally to welcome them, accompanied by New Avalon's chief engineer, a weathered woman named Maria Santos. Vexhai noticed immediately that she shared a last name with the captain who had rescued them. Captain Santos is my sister, the governor explained when Vexhai asked about the connection. The Santos family has been working in space for 3 generations. We know the value of helping people in trouble. The governor was a small, energetic woman with graying hair and hands that showed the calluses of someone who still did manual work despite her administrative position. She toured the Kethvara with obvious interest, asking technical questions that demonstrated a surprisingly deep understanding of starship systems. Impressive work, she said after examining Tank's jury-rigged power coupling. Not pretty, but effective. That's good engineering in my book. Chief Engineer Santos was already making plans for permanent repairs. We can fabricate new components for your exotic matter containment system, she told Cole then. It'll take a few weeks and we'll have to modify our manufacturing equipment, but it's doable. You can manufacture exotic matter containment units? Cole then asked in amazement. But humans do not possess that technology. We don't, Maria Santos agreed. But we've got the principles figured out from studying your damaged components. And we're pretty good at making things work even when we don't fully understand them. It was the same approach that had characterized every human effort Vexhai had observed. They didn't wait for perfect understanding before taking action. They learned by doing, adapted as they went, and somehow made it work through sheer determination. As the days passed, Vexhai found herself exploring New Avalon and learning about human colonial society. The colony was small by Confederacy standards with only 50,000 inhabitants, but it was completely self-sufficient. The humans had built farms, factories, schools, and research facilities using nothing but their own resources and determination. More importantly, she began to understand that New Avalon represented something unique in galactic civilization. The colony existed in deliberate isolation from the Confederacy, trading with other human settlements but maintaining independence from the larger galactic powers. We tried working within the Confederacy system, Governor Chen explained during one of their conversations. But we kept running into the same problem. Every decision was made by someone else, someone who had never lived on a frontier world or understood what we needed to survive. So you chose to remain primitive rather than accept Confederacy assistance? Vexhai asked. Chen smiled. Primitive. We've got fusion power, antimatter drives, quantum communication systems, and medical technology that can regrow lost limbs. What we don't have is bureaucrats making decisions about our lives from offices 50 light-years away. It was a revelation that challenged everything Vexhai thought she knew about human society. These people weren't primitives struggling to catch up with more advanced civilizations. They were deliberate exiles who had chosen independence over integration. On the 10th day of their stay, everything changed. The first sign of trouble was a squadron of sleek ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Their configuration was immediately recognizable to any Zalani as Confederacy military vessels. The lead ship was a heavy cruiser that outgunned everything in the New Avalon system combined. "Attention, New Avalon colony," came an official transmission. "This is Admiral Kethvar of the Confederacy fleet. We are here to retrieve stolen property and fugitive citizens." Vexhai felt her heart sink as she recognized the voice. Admiral Kethvar was Captain Thresh-Mull's direct superior, a rigid traditionalist who viewed any deviation from protocol as a personal insult. His presence here meant that the Confederacy had decided to take an interest in their rescue. Governor Chen's response was calm, but firm. "Admiral, this is Governor Sarah Chen of New Avalon. We're not aware of any stolen property or fugitives in our system. Would you care to be more specific? You are harboring the crew of the Confederacy vessel Kethvara, which was officially classified as lost with all hands. You will return them immediately, along with their ship and any technology that may have been taken from it." Captain Santos, who was monitoring the conversation from the repair station, spoke up on a private channel. "Governor, they can't just demand people like cargo. The Zalani crew came here voluntarily." "I know," Chen replied grimly, "but I don't think the Admiral sees it that way." Vexhai found herself standing on the bridge of the Kethvara as Admiral Kethvar's ship approached the repair station. Through the view screen, she could see the massive Confederacy vessel, its hull gleaming with the perfection that marked the most advanced ships in known space. She could also see the small human ships that were moving to interpose themselves between the Admiral and the station. They were cargo haulers, mining vessels, and passenger transports completely outclassed by the military cruiser. But they came anyway. "Dr. Vexhai," came a communication from the Admiral's ship. "You and your crew will prepare for immediate transfer to Confederacy custody. This illegal detention ends now." Vexhai looked around at the humans who had risked everything to save her and her crewmates. They had asked for nothing in return except the satisfaction of helping people in need. Now they were facing down a superior military force to protect strangers who weren't even their own species. She made a decision that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. "Admiral," she replied, "with respect, we are not being detained. We are guests of New Avalon Colony, and we choose to remain here." The silence that followed was electric with tension. In all her years of service, Vexhai had never directly defied a Confederacy superior. But then, she had never seen what real civilization looked like until she met the humans. The standoff lasted 3 tense hours. Admiral Kethvar's cruiser hung in space like a predator, while the small human ships maintained their protective formation around the repair station. It was a confrontation that should have ended quickly, with the humans backing down in the face of superior firepower. Instead, more ships kept arriving. Dr. Vexhai watched from the observation deck as vessel after vessel dropped out of hyperspace. They came from other human colonies, other frontier settlements that had somehow learned about the situation at New Avalon. Each ship was different. Some were cargo haulers like the Perseverance, others were passenger transports or mining ships. A few looked like they might have been military vessels once, though they now flew under civilian registrations. "How are they coordinating this?" Captain Thresh-Mull asked, standing beside her. "The communication delay between systems should make this kind of response impossible." Governor Chen, who had joined them to observe the arriving ships, smiled grimly. "We have our own communication networks. When one of our colonies is threatened, word spreads fast." By the end of the 3rd hour, nearly 40 human ships had arrived in the New Avalon system. They were still vastly outgunned by the single Confederacy cruiser, but their presence had transformed the situation from a simple confrontation into something much more complex. Admiral Kethvar finally broke the silence. "Governor Chen, I demand an explanation for this unlawful assembly. You are interfering with official Confederacy business." "Admiral," Chen replied calmly, "we're not interfering with anything. We're simply exercising our right to peaceful assembly in our own system." These ships are here because their crews heard that New Avalon was being threatened. Threatened? Kethavar's voice carried outrage. I am conducting a lawful recovery operation. The crew of the Kethvara are Confederacy citizens who were officially listed as casualties. Their recovery is a matter of internal Confederacy affairs. Except they're not casualties, Captain Santos interjected over the communication channel. They're alive, healthy, and free to make their own choices. Last I checked, slavery was illegal even under Confederacy law. The Admiral's response was swift and sharp. Captain, you will cease your interference immediately or face the consequences. This vessel has sufficient firepower to destroy every ship in this system. A new voice joined the conversation, calm and steady despite the threat. Admiral, this is Captain Rebecca Wong of the merchant vessel Freedom's Price. I'm curious about something. Are you really threatening to open fire on civilian vessels for the crime of existing in their own system? The Confederacy has jurisdiction over all its citizens, regardless of location, Kethvar replied. Funny thing about that, Wong continued. See, I've got a copy of the Confederacy's own official casualty report right here. According to this document, the crew of the Kethvara died 47 days ago when their ship suffered catastrophic engine failure. How can the Confederacy claim jurisdiction over dead people? The communication channel fell silent. Vexhai realized that the human captain had found a logical flaw in the Admiral's position that even the Confederacy couldn't ignore. If the crew was officially dead, then they couldn't legally be Confederacy citizens. And if they weren't citizens, the Admiral had no authority over them. Furthermore, Wong added, according to the same report, the Kethvara was written off as a total loss. That means the Confederacy has already claimed insurance compensation for the vessel. You can't recover property you've already been paid for losing. Dr. Vexhai felt a strange sensation in her chest that took her a moment to identify. She was feeling proud of the humans, proud of their quick thinking and their refusal to be intimidated. These people who had been dismissed as primitives were outmaneuvering one of the Confederacy's most senior officers, using nothing but logic and determination. This legal maneuvering changes nothing, Admiral Kethver said finally. I have orders to recover Confederacy personnel and property. Then I'm afraid you'll have to go back and tell your superiors that the personnel in question don't want to be recovered. Governor Chen replied. Because that's what this comes down to, Admiral. Are you going to use force against people who don't want your help? Another long silence followed. Vexhai could imagine the calculations taking place aboard the Admiral's ship. Opening fire on civilian vessels would create a diplomatic incident that would echo throughout the galaxy. But backing down would mean admitting that a group of primitive humans had successfully defied Confederacy authority. The decision was taken out of the Admiral's hands by Dr. Vexhai herself. Admiral Kethver, she said, her voice carrying clearly over the communication system. I am Dr. Vexhai of the research vessel Kethvara. I formally request political asylum from the human colony of New Avalon. Dr. Vexhai, Threshamol said quietly. What are you doing? What I should have done weeks ago, she replied. I cannot serve a government that abandons its people when helping them becomes inconvenient. I cannot be part of a system that values efficiency over compassion. 3 other members of her crew stepped forward to stand beside her. Engineering Officer Yithran, Medical Officer Meltar, and Communications Specialist Dexhai all formally requested asylum as well. This is unacceptable, Admiral Kethvar transmitted. You are Confederacy citizens with duties and obligations. You cannot simply abandon your responsibilities. Responsibilities? Dr. Vexhai's voice carried an emotion that surprised everyone who heard it, including herself. It was anger, pure and simple. You abandoned us first, Admiral. You left us to die because saving us was too expensive. These humans risked everything to help strangers who could offer them nothing in return. Which civilization is more worthy of loyalty? She turned to address the human ships that surrounded them. People of New Avalon, of all the human colonies, I want you to know what you've done here. You've shown us what civilization really means. It's not about having the most advanced technology or the most efficient systems. It's about refusing to abandon people who need help. She activated her personal recording device, the same one she had used to document what she thought would be her final moments aboard the dying Kethvara. But instead of recording her death, she would use it to share a message that would spread throughout the galaxy. My name is Dr. Vexhai, she began, knowing that her words would be transmitted to every ship in the system, and from there to colonies and worlds across known space. I am a xenobiologist who has spent my life studying alien species for the Galactic Confederacy. But today I have learned that the most remarkable species in the galaxy is the one that everyone underestimates. Humans don't have the most advanced technology. They don't have the most efficient governments. They don't make decisions based on pure logic or careful cost-benefit analysis. What they have is something more important. They have the courage to do what's right even when it costs them everything. When my ship was dying and my own government abandoned us, humans responded. They didn't ask what they would gain. They didn't calculate the risks. They simply came to help because help was needed. And now, when faced with superior force and threats of violence, they stand together to protect people who aren't even their own species. This is what real civilization looks like. Not efficiency, not technology, not power, but the simple refusal to abandon those in need. Admiral Kethvar's ship began to move, turning away from New Avalon. "This matter is not finished," he transmitted. "The Confederacy will not forget this insult." "Neither will we," Governor Chen replied. "And neither will anyone else who hears this story." As the Confederacy cruiser jumped to hyperspace, Vexhai felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. For the first time in her adult life, she was free to make her own choices about who to serve and why. Captain Threshamol approached her as the human ships began to disperse, returning to their colonies and their normal lives. "Dr. Vexhai," he said, "I want you to know that I understand your decision, and I envy your courage." "You could stay too," she offered. "All of you could," Threshamol shook his head. "Someone needs to return to Confederacy space and tell them what we've learned here. Someone needs to plant seeds of change within the system." Vexhai nodded, understanding. Change would come slowly to the Confederacy, but it would come. The story of what happened at New Avalon would spread, carried by traders and travelers to every corner of known space. Other species would begin to question systems that put efficiency above compassion, profit above people. As the Kethvara prepared for its journey back to Confederacy space, now fully repaired by human engineers using hybrid technology that shouldn't have worked but did, Vexhai stood on the observation deck looking out at the small blue world that had become her new home. She thought about the transmission she had made, already spreading across the galaxy like ripples on a pond. Soon everyone would know that humanity's greatest export wasn't technology or resources, it was hope. Hope that there was a better way to live, a better way to treat each other, a better definition of what it meant to be civilized. The humans had rescued her from more than just a dying ship in deep space. They had rescued her from a life without purpose, a civilization without soul.